Hello and welcome to TA Made Simple. Bob Cook, who's a transactional analyst,
Yes.
he explains in very simple terms key theory in TA, and one of those bits of key theory is what Byrne described, Eric Byrne, the founder of TA, as second-order structural analysis. And it's quite a development on the first idea. So, first of all, Bob, what is second-order structural analysis?
Well, let's say what first-order structural analysis is first.
Good idea.
Yeah. So the major personality model within transactional analysis was TA, which Byrne came up with in his TA ideas, was what many people know as the PAC model. In other words, P stands for parent, A stands for adult, and C stands for child. And put it together, you've got a model of personality, how you become the way you are. Now, in earlier videos in this series, I've explained the PAC model, so I'm not going to go over that. But it was also called by Eric Byrne the structural model. Sometimes it was called first-order structural model, but it's a development of the parent, adult, and child. Okay, and that's the model most people use for diagnosing what part of the self people come from, what's happened to the adult, what's happening in the parent, what's happening in the child. But he went on to devise what he called the second-order structural model, where you split further down the child ego state.
Oh, okay.
To what was called, he called P1, A1, and C1, all making up the child ego state in the first 5 years of their life. So you have an early parent ego state, you have an early adult ego state, and an early child ego state. And the early child ego state, C1, was called somatic child. The early pre-operational thinking was called little professor. That would be early intuition. And then the early parent, either the witch parent or the magical parent, Steiner would call it, was called electrode, because the messages had been electroded into the early brain, because we know that the brain is very susceptible to information and a bit like a sponge in those first 2-3 years of life. So that's why I use the metaphor of electrode, really stamped in those early messages from the significant other people in the infant's life. So, for example, I remember, when I was collecting my daughter, she was 2 years of age, from the nursery. She just learned to talk, and I found her just talking to her friend, who must have been 2 as well, just like my mother talked, just like her mother talked to her. So, in other words, she was, acting out those early parental interjects. So the child is split up into almost like a child developmental model, if you like, of the development of the early feelings stored in the body, called the somatic child, the early pre-operational thinking, intuition of little professor, and the early parental messages, negative and positive, which is called electrode. And that was called structural analysis.
Yeah, I think it's the interesting one. That the electrode's almost like putting the operating system in a computer.
Yeah, very good. I like that very much. The early template, if you like.
Yeah.
That's really important. Yeah, because what we do in TA is, of course, inquire and delve into the early child ego states, the early unconscious processes of the clients that we work with. So to be able to look at the early intuitive pre-operational thinking, to look at those early templates you just talked about, to look at the early feelings and how they were conflicting with the parent and early child is so important. And it gives us a language to discuss clinical aspects or even clinical diagnosis.
Yeah, and I think also, talk about the second order structural analysis, I think it must inform script at some level.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm glad you put those two. Yeah, because at our very early levels, we make very early decisions, often without words, by the way, but within feelings and within our body. We make those early decisions as we grow older, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which become our early script decisions, which then form our developing more mature adult, our developing more mature parent, but becomes the very central decisions that run the whole of our script and life plan.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say run. It's almost like it's the operating system.
That's why I went with that metaphor, because you're absolutely correct.
Yeah,
you're absolutely correct. Those decisions that we make so early in our life for survival reasons, which becomes part of our script so early in our life, it is almost run like exactly like you just said, an operating system. My daughter said today, "Dad, can I have a new computer?" It's 7 years old, and it isn't working very well. When I switch it, I'll keep switching itself off. I've got to have a new computer. It's a bit like this. As a person gets older and older, the outdated images and decisions that we made in response to our family of origin may be outdated. And people come to therapy to actually update the new template, if you want to use that metaphor.
Yes, it's almost like getting as you say, patches in the computer world, and they're getting updates. And of course, the interesting thing is that those updates are internal. Computers are kind of downloaded and they're loaded on. But of course, in therapy, the idea is that you see the world and update your own operating system.
Correct. But you have to do that in relationship with the therapist.
Absolutely.
When you're actually attempting to do that by yourself, you're in the system. It's almost impossible. You're attempting to update your own computer in your system. It becomes an impossibility because you've got no external frame of reference. So it's the therapist in the transactional dialogue which is actually help you change and update and put your new script on the road.
Fab. Well, there you have it. That's second order analysis. It gives you a model of child development. So if anybody's doing any child course, make reference to that. And of course, it links to script. And while we're talking about links, Bob, see what I did there. If you go upstairs or downstairs, you can see that this is in a playlist. If you hit the playlist, you can see every aspect of TA explained by a real expert in the field, right from just a very basic structural model right through to the more complex theory of second order structural analysis. So it's a wonderful knowledge base. So you should be watching that if you're a TA person.
Great. And next week we're going to move on to, I think, the fantasy parent.
Oh, well, there we go.
That'll be an interesting one.
So stay tuned in, and we'll see you again in the next video.
Yeah. Look forward to that, Roy. Look forward to that a lot.
Thanks a lot, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.